What's going on, fam? Welcome back to the channel. I've got a very special review for you guys today. Finally got my hands on a pair of the Nike Phantom Luna in this beautiful launch colorway, the white and orange. I am really interested to see what this football boot feels like in particular. A lot of the tech specs are going to be very similar to boots that we've seen in the past from Nike, aside from maybe the sole plate. But for me, this is a pair of football boots that looks a lot like a Magista and a GX kind of all put together. So let's hop straight into the unboxing and we'll talk all about those tech specs. So the box for the Phantom Luna launch is actually really spectacular. It's an all white box and you've got these little kind of reflective pieces across the upper. Hopefully you can see that, but there's little lines across the upper that are reflective. You got the black Nike swoosh, the Phantom Luna logoing there on the side, Nike, and by the way, these are a 10.5 in women's, which is a 9 in men's. So just to be aware of the sizing differences, oftentimes on websites you'll see the 9 in women's, and that is what you would pick. But for a lot of, hopefully some websites and hopefully some dealers will be very, very cautious about what the sizing is like, because for men, so for myself, you go up a size and a half compared to women's sizing. So this, a size 9 in women's is actually a 7.5 in men's, whereas I have to go to a 10.5 in women's to get my usual size 9 US. So that's how the sizing works there. This is a 27 centimeters and a Euro 42.5, which is the normal sizing for me. And then on the bottom of the box, it's fairly straightforward as well. Regular Nike box there, and then the Phantom Luna with that sideways Nike check as well. All right, here we go. Unboxing the Nike Phantom Luna. Okay, very cool. So on the inside of the cover, they've got that Cyclone 360 logo. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's one of the sort of the new technologies that we haven't seen before from a Nike football boot that's built around women for multi-directional movement and all that stuff. So without further ado, here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, first off, this colorway is absolutely fantastic. Wow. That's a really nice looking pair of football boots. I think these look really sweet. I am a fan of the Magista Silo just in general, more number 1 than number 2, and this looks a lot like Magista Obra 1, especially with that high cut fly knit collar and some of the coding on this upper, which we'll go into in a minute. Obviously this up and down Nike swoosh looks kind of cool. That's a new sort of orientation and placement for the Nike swoosh from the brand. Usually it sits kind of around this area or right on the side. Very, very cool. And then that Phantom Luna logoing on the back. There's that Nike Cyclone 360. Very, very cool. This is a very nice pair of football boots. They feel really robust straight out of the box. Nice materials, a little bit interesting for this Nike grip knit upper. We'll talk about that tech in just a minute, but very interesting. A lot different than the Nike Phantom GX, which originally introduced the Nike grip knit not that long ago. So very, very cool. Let's get this other one out of the box and we'll see. There you go. There's that right boot. Very nice. Very nice. Love, I mean, white boots with accent colors are really hard to go wrong. And I think there's a string bag in here as well. Oh, wow. Holy moly. Okay, this grit, oh, wow. This string bag is super nice. It's like a silk almost on the inside, and then it's got this really interesting like matte finish, almost like a suede liner. Wow, damn, this is probably one of the nicest Nike boot bags I've ever seen, with the grip knit and Cyclone 360 logoing, the metallic, and then you've got Phantom Luna. Yeah, this is definitely the only other string bag that I think even comes close to this. I think is the best that Nike's ever produced, in my opinion. You guys can have a debate in the comment section below. This is a fantastic string bag. The only one that even comes close is those special edition Nike Tiempo Legend 9 Elites that I have in the, I don't remember what the actual colorway was called, but it was white and silver, kind of like this. So let's get this down here. And we'll throw this guy right there. And I'm actually going to take this little branding thing off. There you go. So this is just the Nike Dynamic Fit. Has a little bit of information on the Dynamic Fit collar, creases, creates a seamless integration between the boot and lower leg, which is that piece right here. All right, let's get this out of the way. Okay, so Nike Phantom Luna. What a nice looking pair of football boots. So this does remind me a ton of the Magista line. It's a little bit more stiff straight out of the box. Let me get some of this paper and stuff out as well, just to give you guys an idea of what the upper feels like. But straight out of the box, because it feels like a mesh between a GX and a Magista, it kind of has both of those vibes with a little bit more aggressive stud pattern than both of those, in my opinion, other than the star-shaped studs on the GX. This boot is it's like an amalgamation of all those with the foot shape and the research by female professional players. So that's kind of where this boot fits into their lineup. It's a new silo that will be added to the Tiempo, the GX, and the Vapor, and Superfly, I guess, so the Speed Boot series. This is a very interesting boot for a lot of reasons. So not only is it a boot that's meant for women because it was designed by and most of the research for this boot was from female players, and a lot of that comes down to the sole plate. So let's just start there with the sole plate and talk about this Nike Cyclone 360, which you can see here. All of the studs in this football boot are bladed, which is an interesting nod considering that the marketing for this football boot is all about multi-directional rotational movement. So once you plant here, you want to be able to pivot side to side. My thought is that the most neutral studs for rotational movement are actually just conical studs, something like a Tiempo or an AG sole plate for any of the models that you guys probably have seen on this channel. I've reviewed a couple different Nike AG models before. That's always been my thought. So I am curious to know on AG pitches and FG pitches whether this actually provides sort of a quote-unquote safer playing experience. This Cyclone 360 stud pattern was essentially built to accommodate to the much larger percentage of women's players who get knee and ankle injuries compared to men's players. So there's a huge percentage, they're much more likely, women's players are, to get those ligament injuries in the knee and the ankle. And so this was essentially built based on research from those players to give them the most neutral and most ability to pivot so that when they stick their foot in the ground, when players stick their foot in the ground, you're able to pivot smoothly and you don't catch, the boot studs don't catch and you don't, injure yourself from any of the ankle or knee ligaments. So a really interesting thought by Nike. I think it's, in practice, we'll see how it goes. I find these shaped studs, these bladed studs, to be semi-aggressive compared to what I would think. That being said, this isn't an AG specific sole plate. This is an FG pair of football boots. So my assumption is that they're talking about FG pitches. So I am going to test it quite a bit on grass, natural grass, just because I want to see what the differences are. And of course, I'll test them on AG as well to see if they do actually provide that pivot power that they're advertising so much. That's sort of the whole point behind this boot, was not only the shape difference and the way that this boot kind of feels on your foot, but also in creating a sole plate that was for the safety of their players. As far as responsiveness goes, this is quite a stiff sole plate. Especially here in the midfoot area. There is a little bit of flex here in the forefoot. My guess is that will go, this will break in nicely, but there is quite a bit. I mean, this is a pretty decent amount of flex. Yes, you can kind of flex it a little bit in that midfoot, but that's still really good for a football boot. This is definitely a more structured sole plate than the GX, in my opinion, especially here through where those X creases are, which is really interesting. As I mentioned before, US sizing, this is a US 10.5 in women's, a 9 US, that's the size comparison. You go up, a 9 in women's is a 10.5, the other way around. A 9 in women's is a 7.5 US in men's, and in order for me to get a 9 US in men's, I have to go to a 10.5 in women's. So that's the way this works. Back here in the heel area is Nike's hollowed out heel counter that we saw on the GX. So you've got the heel counter that kind of runs like that on that side, and then on the internal side runs a little bit like this, and then they've left it open here in the heel area so that you have a lot of adjustability and more foot types can fit in. Going back to the Nike GT, the Phantom GT and GT2 series, that was a heel area that provided a ton of blisters to a lot of different foot shapes and types of people, particularly because there was a big external heel or internal heel counter, excuse me, that provided a very predetermined shape, and so that caused a lot of people who didn't fit in that predetermined shape to get blisters. Whereas on the GX, that essentially solved the problem, albeit it being a bit soft, and I think this, they've done a very similar thing here where there's quite a bit of flex. I actually love the way these heels are constructed because it just feels more natural on feet, and then as long as your heel actually fits into the heel and gets locked into place there, there's no issues at all as far as lockdown goes in the heel area. So I really prefer this. Some of you might find that it's a little less responsive or doesn't fit as well as you want it to, but that's just sort of up to you from your own opinion. Now let's move on to the upper, which is kind of the biggest feature other than the sole plate of this football boot. So this is a grip knit upper, Nike grip knit upper that has a fly knit collar. So you get fly knit basically from here up and then through that lacing system, which is a asym fit, which is basically just, it's asymmetrical. It goes towards the medial side of the foot. Interesting because it actually closes off the striking surface, whereas you could put it this way and it would be more striking surface. I guess on the Magista it was kind of in the middle, so it doesn't really matter that much. You're going to be able to strike the ball better, or you're going to be able to strike the ball if you can strike a ball. So that's, you know, the boot's not going to make you better in that sense. But the Nike grip knit upper is quite a bit different than the GX in the sense that the grippy elements, quote unquote, are only really seen on these grooves here on the lateral side of sort of the side and the toe box, and then here on these ridges that come along the internal side of the boot, the medial side of the boot where you would pass. So the rest of this boot is still technically Nike grip knit, so it's still those pre-coated yarns, but they've put a thin layer of silicone coating. So the rest, other than these ridges, the rest of this boot is actually quite smooth, which is really interesting. My guess is this will provide the same sense of, or it will be, because it doesn't have ACC and all that stuff, this is just like the GX, it is naturally water resistant. So you'll be able to, you know, if it rains, you're not going to get super wet inside this area. Obviously water can come through here, but this is sort of a naturally water resistant upper, which is really interesting. But the choice to do the coating over the grip knit is really interesting, and I imagine that's also why this boot isn't as plush and soft as the GX is. So this is a really nice feeling upper, but it is considerably more structured than something like a GX, and I think, or even one of the older Magista Obra series. And so that to me is a really interesting thing. I'm excited to see what it feels like on feet, because once you break something like this in, I'm hoping that it gives you a really, really nice lockdown and gives you much more structure. The GX I found to be one of my favorite boots at the minute. I've been wearing it in games and in training sessions all the time, and I love the Nike grip knit technology. So we'll see how this compares to that after lots of break-in time, which is pretty cool. So that's sort of an overview of what the Nike Phantom Luna is. Again, some subtle differences between this and the GX, which was what introduced Nike grip knit. This is obviously a different version of that grip knit, and then adds some elements from the Magista Obra, and then some bladed stud pattern stuff from even a Vapor, and then you added this Nike Cyclone 360 technology, and it really does kind of come into a package that on paper sounds really, really excellent. The weight of the boot definitely feels a lot heavier, not a lot, but it feels a little bit heavier. I think it runs, for a size 9 US, I think it runs right around the 8-ounce mark, 8.2 ounce mark. I might be wrong there, but I think it's right around that 8-ounce mark. So it's by no means a light boot, but you're really not gonna notice. I've had text messages recently from people saying, hey, I want the lightest boot on the market, but I have really wide feet. I'm like, well, dude, there's not a lot of speed boots. Like, the weight of the boot doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's about what fits your foot the best. So for me, I'm excited. I am a little bit concerned because this is based on a woman's foot, which is oftentimes much thinner than a men's foot. So especially here in this midfoot area, I'm imagining that straight out of the box, I'm gonna get crushed from a feeling and kind of fit perspective. I imagine the length and the toe box will actually be okay, but we'll see on that midfoot if I can handle wearing these for longer extended periods of time. I do have a shoe stretcher now, so I can start to use that as well. So we'll definitely get a 1-month review out of these, I'm hoping, unless they're absolutely ridiculous to try to break in. But my hope is that we will get a good run in these and I'll be able to wear them for training, and then if they're good enough for games. So without further ado, let's hop into the on-feet portion of the video of the new Nike Phantom Phantom Luna and get a sense of what they feel like on feet. All right, fam, out here at the beautiful Rochester Stadium here, it is absolutely blazing warm, even though it doesn't look like it. It's about 90 degrees right now. I'm just getting these Phantom Lunas laced up because I was taking thumbnail photos, and for the thumbnail photo, you want it to be nice and crispy, so you take the laces kind of out until it looks really flush. I will say, in handling these boots a little bit more, I actually filmed the unboxing portion of the video not about an hour ago. And so in handling these boots a little bit more, I am a little bit surprised. Maybe this was on purpose. I would have loved to talk to a Nike rep, but the upper is quite a bit stiffer than the Phantom GX, which is also Nike grip knit, or predominantly Nike grip knit, straight out of the box. So I am curious to know if that will soften up over time, if it's just to keep the shape of the football boot or what, but it is quite a bit stiffer than those Phantom GXs. So I do have a ball behind me, so I'll go grab that in a minute, but let's just hop into this. Because it is also so hot, you'll see a bunch of B-roll of putting on the boots and all that stuff, but I'm gonna try them on just like this for the time being. All right, so here we go. I do have a pair of the thinnest socks I own, which are just so happen to be Nike grip socks. So those are have a little bit of grip elements on them, but they are very, very thin, so it'll give me a good idea of what they feel like true to size. These boots are quite difficult to get on. Let's see if they slide on. There we go. Okay. Wow. Immediate impressions are they are definitely a little bit tight around the midfoot. There's a little bit of extra material here on the inside, the medial side of my toe, and they are quite slim from a straight out of the box perspective, although I do get the sense that they are going to break in. They have a really low toe box profile, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, wow. Okay. All right, let's get this other one on and I'll talk about kind of fit and sizing, but they are definitely pretty narrow. They're definitely more narrow than the GX straight out of the box. It just remains to be said whether, and that'll come with obviously break-in time, if these break in about as wide, or do they keep that structure? And that's part of what I was talking about before with how stiff, and again, we're talking like, they're not that stiff. They're just stiffer than the GX, and the only reason that surprises me is because they're made of the same material. So get the right one on. These are pretty tight straight out of the box. Sizing is perfect though. I will say going, if you're a dude, go 1.5 sizes more than the women's size. So if you're gonna buy a women's size, buy it 1.5 times your normal, or 1.5 above your normal. So for me, again, a 10.5 US fits lengthwise perfect. All right, there we go. Okay, initial thoughts. Let me kind of gather myself. So these fit similarly to, it's like a cross between a Vapor and a Magista almost. I wouldn't say they feel all that much like a GX straight out of the box, just because these are quite a bit stiffer than the GX. They are softening up already. Like, I can start to wiggle my toes a little bit, and because I do have wide feet right in that outside of the foot area, these are, I think, gonna stretch pretty well. I do really like the way the heel fits. That is one aspect of the GX that I cannot stop speaking praises about, is that really flexible, kind of hollowed out heel counter, and on these ones you definitely feel it as well. There's a nice amount of locked in sensation, but adjustability, so that I don't feel like there's any pressure points in that heel area. I am feeling pressure points on the side of my foot, where my foot is the widest, so that's something to keep in mind if you are somebody with wider foot shapes. And then in the toe box area, you do have a decent amount of width in that toe box, and it does feel like it's gonna start to stretch a little bit. But again, with the sort of stiffness of this upper and sort of the robustness of this upper, I do think that it's going to take a little bit longer than the GXs to break in, even though already my feet are starting to feel a little bit better. There is a little bit of creasing on the medial side right by my toe, so right on this inside there's a little bit of sort of empty material that's happening there, which isn't an issue at all from a playing perspective, but it's just something to keep in mind. Touch on the ball, let's go straight into it, is actually pretty nice. It's very padded, so it does remind me, the internal liner does remind me quite a bit of that Magista, which is kind of cool. That's a boot, Agista Obra 1 and 2 are boots that I really enjoyed wearing. You guys might have seen on my Instagram a short of me playing in a fire red version of the AG Agista Obra 2s, which I recently got used, which were awesome. So these do give me a little bit of that type of vibe as well. And then as far as stickiness goes, it definitely isn't as grippy as the grip knit on the GX, which is to be expected, I think. And that's just something that comes along with the upper having a silicone coating on it, so it's mostly kind of smooth except for those ridged areas. And then the other thing that if you're somebody who has pretty voluminous toes, like your toes are pretty thick, maybe this boot isn't right for you. It's, I would say, almost even slimmer than a Vapor as far as how these boots come to a point at the toe. It's almost more than the GX, and the GX is quite slim when it comes down to the toe. Those break in beautifully. I have no issues with the ones that I break in after a while, but these ones definitely are slim. That being said, it is a nice feeling. I'm not much of a high cut type guy. I don't really like high cut boots all that much, but these are fairly comfortable, and they're starting to even soften up just as we sit here. A couple extra, as I said, a little bit of space on that medial side there, and then a little bit of bubbling here on the outside, but because of that dynamic fit collar, I won't really notice it during play just because it's all sort of covered up by that dynamic fit collar, which is great. As far as the sole plate goes, that's one of the big sort of selling points of this football boot. It is pretty responsive. It feels really nice and responsive, and from a pivot power perspective, I mean, I can change directions. Like, this is no problem. Obviously, I'm only going at half pace, but it does feel, at least in principle, even on AG pitches. I know these are an FG boot, but even on AG pitches, these seem to have a decent amount of pivot power. So I'm gonna test these. I'm gonna give you guys more of a sense of what these are like to train in, to play in. If they start to break in really well, I'll probably feature them in a game at some point as well. So you guys can watch out for that one. But I do really wanna test this because I wanna see if, you know, Nike's marketing stuff, regardless of whether you're a dude or a girl, it doesn't really matter. The point is that they're built for they market it as something that's gonna keep you away from injuries, so to speak. And I wanna see if these boots actually do feel safer, quote unquote, than a boot that has a conical stud pattern, right? So something that you would usually consider to be AG or safer on both of those pitches. So that's kind of it for my initial thoughts. Again, I think the touch is really nice. I think the feeling of the boot, albeit it being pretty tight straight out of the box, at least for my foot shape, is one of those things I'm just gonna have to get used to. They are a bit tight because they are built for women, so they are a little bit more narrow, but I do think that these boots are gonna fit me after some break-in time. I do feel like they are gonna stretch, and they've already started to kind of mold a little bit, and I can feel them softening up a little bit, especially because it's so warm outside. So follow-up thoughts will come in a training session video and a 1-month review. You guys will see both of those, and then obviously in the meantime and in between those videos, you guys know that I will be training in them here at the pitch for Flower City, and I'll be wearing them on a normal basis to try and break them in and give you guys the best opportunity to see what they feel like over a longer period of time, over that 1 month to 6 weeks kind of time period. And of course, how durable they are, especially on this AG pitch. So if you guys enjoyed that video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know down in the comment section below what the next boot you guys want me to review is. And if you guys are interested in in-season programs, go to my website. Down in the link on the description, it'll be the second link in the description box, or first link down in the description box below for in-season lifting programs. Very, very important for staying fit, staying injury-free, talking about injury-free, and also continuing those strength gains during season. So as always, be awesome, take care. I'll see y'all in the next video.